Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to unpack a really pivotal moment today, something that truly reshaped the Middle East. I'm talking about the first ever direct military confrontation between Israel and Iran.
That's right. It kicked off, you remember, on June 13th.
Exactly. Israel sent, what was it, over 200 fighter jets deep into Iranian airspace.
Targeting key military infrastructure and, crucially, nuclear sites.
This was a direct strike. I mean, completely different from anything we'd seen between them before.
And the response from Iran?
Yeah.
It was immediate and incredibly broad.
How broad are we talking?
Well, within hours, hundreds of missiles were launched, flying over 2,100 kilometers right into Israeli territory.
So sirens across the country?
Sirens blaring, explosions rocking cities. The impact was felt everywhere, even in, sacred places like Jerusalem. It was a huge escalation.
A complete shift, really, from their long-standing animosity.
Absolutely, because for over 5 decades, look, these two nations have been bitter adversaries, yes. But their conflict, it always played out indirectly, through proxies.
Right, that complex web of other groups doing the fighting. Direct, open warfare like this.
It just seemed unthinkable before.
Exactly.
So our deep dive today is really about getting under the skin of this. Not just what happened, but why now? Why did that long-held proxy strategy basically collapse? And what does this direct clash mean for the future? Especially in a region where, let's face it, national power is tied up with warheads.
And it's so important to remember why the proxy strategy existed in the first place. Like you said, declared enemies for over 50 years, but no large-scale direct combat.
Why not? Was it purely choice?
Not entirely. Think about the geography. That huge distance, 2,100 kilometers, roughly. Plus, you have countries like Jordan, Syria, Iraq sitting right in between them.
So a direct fight was just difficult, geopolitically messy.
It practically mandated a proxy approach. It wasn't just a preference. It was baked into the geopolitical reality. And that reality turned these other regional players into the battlegrounds. It shaped Middle East conflict for, well, generations. Okay, so that proxy strategy, deeply ingrained, how did it start to unravel? What were the key moments?
Well, you have to look back to October 7th, 2023, that Hamas attack.
Hamas, based in Gaza, widely seen as an Iranian proxy.
Correct. That devastating attack on Israel. Civilian casualties, hostages taken, 251 people.
And Netanyahu's response was immediate, full-scale war on Hamas.
Which immediately created a two-front situation for Israel, didn't it?
Hamas in the south, but who else?
While they were intensely focused on Gaza, they also had Hezbollah to worry about. Up in the north, in Lebanon.
Right. Hezbollah formed back in '82, wasn't it, with Iranian support during Israel's occupation of southern Lebanon.
Exactly, and they'd grown massively. Became Iran's largest, probably most formidable proxy, often described as a state within a state.
A constant, significant threat on Israel's northern border.
Definitely. And then came something really unusual, the pager attack.
Ah, yes, September 17th, 2024. That was bizarre. Mini bombs hidden in pagers.
Exploding simultaneously across Lebanon. Southern Beirut, too. Dozens killed, thousands injured.
And Hezbollah immediately blamed Israel's Mossad, right? Claiming the bombs were put in during manufacturing.
They did. And think about what that signifies. It wasn't just a tactical hit. It was like an unprecedented supply chain hack.
Yeah.
It showed this chilling new capability, how deep intelligence could infiltrate and undermine these proxies in really unconventional, almost invisible ways.
And that wasn't the end of it for Hezbollah, was it?
Not at all. The blows came thick and fast. Just days after the pager attack, September 27th, a massive explosion lights up the sky.
Yeah.
Over Beirut's Dahiya district.
What was that?
That was Israel announcing they had successfully eliminated Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah.
How? He was known for being deep underground, heavily protected.
Reports suggest they used a massive 2,000-pound U.S.-made bomb, a bunker buster, guided by GPS, pinpoint accuracy, designed specifically to penetrate deep bunkers like the one he was hiding in.
A staggering blow, losing their leader like that.
Huge. And Israel didn't let up. They pressed the advantage.
Which is ground invasion.
October 2024. Israeli ground forces move into southern Lebanon, taking back territory they'd actually been pushed out of 25 years earlier.
So by early 2025, Hezbollah, Iran's strongest proxy, significantly weakened.
Dramatically weakened. But there was another piece of the puzzle falling into place around the same time.
Yeah.
Something critical that enabled this shift towards direct confrontation.
What was that?
Syria.
Ah, Syria. Always the crucial link, geographically.
Exactly. It was the land bridge, the physical barrier between Iran and Israel. And under President Bashar al-Assad, Syria was a very loyal Iranian ally, for decades.
Iran had backed Assad heavily in a civil war, hadn't they?
Massively, for 14 years.
Yeah.
Weapons, equipment, they even sent Hezbollah fighters to prop them up. Syria was vital Iranian real estate, strategically speaking.
But that vital corridor, it turned out to be fragile.
Unexpectedly so. Late November 2024, anti-Assad forces, specifically the HTS group, a major rebel faction, they launched this lightning offensive.
How fast was it?
In just 8 days, they swept across Syria and captured Damascus, the capital. He fled the country. Just like that, 5 decades of his family's rule over. It created this sudden power vacuum.
And Israel saw an opportunity.
They acted decisively, immediately. Dozens of Israeli jets poured into Syrian airspace, heavy airstrikes, relentlessly targeting Syrian military infrastructure.
What kind of targets?
Everything. Ammo depots, chemical weapons sites, military research centers, naval bases, air bases, you name it.
The scale of the destruction.
In just 2 days, estimates suggest over 80% of Syria's entire military capacity was just obliterated.
Wow, that's a monumental strategic loss for Iran.
Absolutely crippling. The fall of Assad wasn't just political. It physically cut Iran's land route to Hezbollah. Aid delivery became incredibly difficult.
But maybe even more important,
the airspace. With Syria's military and air defenses shattered, Syrian airspace was essentially wide open. Suddenly, Israeli jets had an unimpeded flight path directly towards Iran.
You could see why Iran's supreme leader called it a conspiracy. The strategic implications were enormous.
He described it, quite emotionally, as a plot by Israel and the U.S. It highlights just how deeply that blow landed.
So the proxies are weakened, the direct aerial route is open, the stage is set.
Exactly. Set for something that had been unthinkable for half a century.
But to really get the full picture, we need to wind the clock back even further, don't we? Understand the roots of this rivalry.
We do, because Iran, as ancient Persia, has this incredibly long history, one of the world's oldest civilizations. Modern Iranian history, you could say, starts around 1925 with the Pahlavi dynasty.
And specifically Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who came to power in 41.
Right, and he made a very deliberate choice to build strong ties with the West. The UK, obviously, because of oil interests.
Yeah, and the rising power after World War II, the United States.
Correct. He pushed this image of modernization, land reforms, women's rights in politics, education, trying to align Iran culturally and politically with the West.
But there was another side to that coin, wasn't there? It wasn't all progress and westernization.
That's a key point. Yes, he pushed modernization, but his rule was fundamentally autocratic. He kept a tight grip on power, controlled his prime ministers, and dissent was brutally suppressed by his secret police, the Savak.
Which inevitably fuels resentment, right?
Absolutely. It created this undercurrent of nationalist feeling, and a growing anti-U.S. sentiment bubbled beneath the surface of all those reforms.
Okay, so given that Western alignment, it's maybe less surprising, but still quite striking, that under the Shah, Iran actually had good relations with Israel.
It is striking, especially when you consider the whole Palestinian land dispute issue, which was already deeply sensitive across the region.
How did that work? Didn't Iran oppose the UN partition plan in 47?
They did. They voted against it, warning it would cause deep regional conflict, which, turned out to be true. But crucially, when Israel declared statehood in 1948, Iran, despite having a pretty strong military at the time, didn't join the other Arab nations in attacking Israel.
Why not? What was the strategic thinking there?
It seems largely geopolitical. Iran was looking for allies, specifically non-Arab allies, to help counterbalance the rising tide of Arab nationalism that they saw as a potential threat in the region. Israel fit that bill.
Iran and Israel as allies against Arab nationalism. That really is a historical twist many people might not know about.
It certainly paints a very different picture of the region back then.
So what shattered that alliance? What was the catalyst for the seismic shift we saw with the Islamic Revolution in 1979?
That revolution was the absolute game changer. Everything changed. Protests led by Imam Ayatollah Khomeini, who's in exile, they just escalated and escalated.
Until the Shah couldn't hold on anymore.
Exactly. He fled the country in January 1979. Just 2 weeks later, Khomeini returns.
To this massive, ecstatic welcome, right? Millions in the street.
Millions. The military, the police, the pillars holding up the Shah's regime. They just crumbled under the weight of popular demand for change. Khomeini supporters took control.
And that was the end of the monarchy.
The end of a 2,500-year-old monarchy. Gone. Replaced by this completely new political system.
Where religious leaders held ultimate power.
Full power, yes.
Yeah.
with Khomeini himself as the supreme leader. And this wasn't just an internal shift, it radically reordered Iran's entire relationship with the outside world.
How so?
Well, the United States went from being a close ally to the enemy, famously labeled the Great Satan.
And Israel.
Relations completely severed. Iran declared Israel a cancer of the Middle East that must be eradicated. That was the official line.
A total reversal.
Total. And Iran threw its full weight behind the Palestinian cause.
It's quite telling that PLO leader Yasser Arafat was one of the very first foreign dignitaries to visit Tehran after the revolution.
Okay, so fast forward back to our timeline. You can draw a straight line, can't you? From the systematic dismantling of those proxies, Hamas weakened, Hezbollah dealt major blows, the Assad regime collapsing in Syria, directly leading to that opening of Syrian airspace, which then enabled Israel's big move. The June 13th strike, that direct 2,100-kilometer hit on Iranian territory, aimed squarely at key strategic sites, particularly those nuclear facilities.
Which brings up the U.S. involvement, because Israel struck for 9 days but didn't fully achieve its objectives.
It seems the targets, especially the deeply buried nuclear sites, proved very difficult to completely neutralize with the munitions Israel was using. So on June 22, 2025, the United States intervened directly.
With what?
7 B-2 stealth bombers, flying all the way from Missouri directly to Iran.
And they dropped their really big ones.
Yes, the GBU-57 bunker busters, specifically targeting Iran's Natanz and Fordo nuclear plants, which are buried, 80 meters underground?
A major escalation involving the U.S. directly, and yet shortly after that, it stopped.
It did. This whole unprecedented direct conflict phase lasted just 12 days.
Before both sides agreed to a ceasefire. Why?
Reports indicate it was largely due to request and probably significant pressure from the United States.
So a pause button is hit. But what did that ceasefire actually achieve? Did the strikes work?
Well, that's the crucial question. A Pentagon report came out shortly after, June 25th, and it indicated that despite the B-2 strikes, Iran's nuclear capabilities were not significantly damaged.
Not significantly damaged, so the core issue remains entirely unresolved.
Exactly. It highlights the persistent central problem, those nuclear ambitions. And you have to understand, for both Israel and Iran, this isn't just about having another weapon.
What is it about then?
It's existential. It's tied to their fundamental survival in a really volatile neighborhood. Acquiring or preventing the acquisition of nuclear capability isn't just military strategy. It's seen as vital for deterrence, for guaranteeing the state's continued existence.
So for Israel, it's about ensuring survival against Iran and its network of proxies.
Precisely. And for Iran, it's perceived as essential for preserving the Islamic regime against powerful enemies, primarily the U.S. and Israel. Nuclear weapons, or the capability to build them quickly, become central to the very idea of survival for two states locked in such intense opposition.
It really puts the stakes into perspective. This deep dive, I think, has traced that journey clearly. From 5 long decades of shadowy proxy wars to the sudden, stark reality of direct confrontation, all driven by these huge geopolitical shifts and, of course, those deep historical roots we talked about.
Yeah, the landscape has fundamentally changed. The old rules don't seem to apply anymore.
Which leaves us with a pretty unsettling final thought, doesn't it?
It does. If this reasoned ceasefire is really just a pause, just a temporary halt, and if those nuclear capabilities, damaged or not, remain the absolute core of their rivalry, what does that actually mean?
What does it mean for the balance of power? What does it mean for, well, the very existence of both nations in the years ahead?
That's the question hanging over the entire region now. The strategic calculations have been completely upended.